Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you back from the break. My name is Hannah Messerly, and I'm a Senior Private Sector Development Specialist here at the World Bank in the tourism area, and also a member of today's organizing committee. So on a both personal and professional note, as I see many friends as well as colleagues and fellow workers in the industry, I want to welcome you all and say it's an honor to have you here today. We will now move on from the first panel and the discussion that was, I think, quite engaging and provided a diverse set of perspectives, on to really digging into a bit of the research that drives the discussion that we're having here today. We are excited to launch this research, which you all have on your desk, The Voice of Travelers, Leveraging User-Generated Content for Tourism Development. We would like to congratulate the report authors, Talia Salem, who is here, as well as Louise Twining-Ward. You want to... And also thank their TripAdvisor colleagues or partners in this publication. The two teams, the World Bank team as well as the TripAdvisor team, work closely together to develop this really cutting-edge research and to bring together both the data along with good practices from destinations around the world and to show the potential of UGC in tourism for development. A copy of the report is placed on your chairs. And there are extra copies outside as well if you would like to take a few home. Please distribute it widely. For those of you that are online, and by the way, we are having quite an active conversation right now with over about 100 folks. We're getting quite a few questions, so our panelists can get ready for those, and quite a bit of trending on Twitter. A reminder also that, as I said, this event is being live streamed and recorded, and if you have a question for the panel, please tweet us at Pound Tourism for Dev, or you can fill out a question card and pass it to the media table. Talia and Louise will also be available in the room afterwards to answer any questions you have about the report. Make sure you ask them about the third paragraph on page 26, because they probably will be able to tell you exactly what it says. So while we are certainly interested to listen to travelers, a real opportunity and challenge is to hear the voices of travelers and learn from their insights. We will begin to do this through the next presentation and panel, during which I challenge each of you to think about how we use these insights. How do we use them to guide policy, to take actions, to really inform our businesses and make a difference as a sector going forward? Kindly allow me to introduce Ms. Nori Quintos. Nori is editor-at-large at National Geographic Travel Media and an independent communications consultant. All of our speakers and moderators' bios are online, but what I'd like to share with you about Nori is that she really follows her passion and commitment to the tourism sector, contributing to a National Geographic Travel Media's brand. However, what I can really tell you about Nori is that she is one of our industry's most creative professionals. This is a woman who knows how to tell stories. And in fact, she works helping destinations and travel companies to find and tell their stories through communication audits, training, and other projects. Nori, I'd like to welcome you to the stage along with your the presenters and the panelists for our next presentation. And thank you again all for being here.
Thanks. Not much room here. Okay. Thank you, Hannah, for that lovely introduction. Good morning, everyone. As a journalist and communications consultant who has covered the travel industry for more years than I care to share, I have had a front row seat to the power shift in content from the hands of a few legacy media brands who told the world where to travel from their lofty perches, to the hands of the many everyday travelers who now have access to ubiquitous digital tools to make their voices heard by creating their own content. Now, the concept of WOM, word of mouth, is certainly not new. People have been talking about and sharing about their travels for forever, really. And some of you may even be old enough to have sat through Grandpa's boring old slideshows. But the game changer is that travelers' opinions are now easily generated and amplified on aggregate platforms, and that there is enormous value in that accumulated data. So how can destinations, especially developing ones, harness those voices to not just promote places, but to use the data generated by these voices to manage their destinations in a sustainable way? This is our topic today. And I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our esteemed speakers, Damien Cook, a strategic consultant to destinations around the world as CEO and founder of eTourism Frontiers, Charlie Ballard, who leads a team at TripAdvisor that uses traveler data to better understand the fast-changing world of travel, Adam Sachs, president of Tourism Economics, which provides analysis and forecasting for better tourism planning, and John Perrottet, a senior private sector specialist with the World Bank Group, working on tourism projects that create growth and investment opportunities. So let me just explain, there will be two parts to this session today. The first part will be an overview of the hot off-the-presses joint World Bank TripAdvisor report, which you probably have in your seats or in your hands. It's called The Voice of Travelers, Leveraging User-Generated Content for Inclusive and Sustainable Tourism Development. Don't let the title scare you, it's fascinating reading. Damien, Charlie, and Adam will each present aspects of the report, and after that, we'll transition onto part two, delving in deeper with all our panelists. So that's the plan. Sound good? It's all right? Good. All right. Damien, you want to come up?
I think I can speak from here. That's fine. Take a seat. Good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here. I'm going to be introducing the report today with a kind of an overview of what we were looking at when it comes to user-generated content. I think if there was one word we heard again and again in this morning's first panel, and I'm sure you'll hear throughout the day, is the word sharing, from a shared economy through to actually shared experiences. And what's driving the new normal in travel is constant sharing. And any of us that are on Instagram, on Facebook, regularly read TripAdvisor reviews, are constantly being exposed to people sharing their experiences. If we aggregate together thousands and tens and thousands of traveler Instagram photographs, as you see here, you see the constant sharing of travel experiences, from point of departure through every experience that these travelers have. That boring grandfather's slideshow you talked about is still happening. It's just happening now much more and in real time on social media as we literally see our friends and families experience firsthand. And it's a compulsive need people have to share these experiences. The average traveler now, their social media output, their Instagram photos, what they're posting online, quadruples when they travel, because they have experiences they want to share. It brings about the bragging factor of wanting to show the experience directly. But as you can see, there's a lot of commonality in these photos. And this is where we start to see data points emerge. Common experiences repeated again and again, from the very place where they take a photo to the platforms where they share it. So someone mentioned selfies this morning, and selfies is a relatively recent concept, but it's something that's quite important to the sharing. It's the direct sharing of your experience, and it might seem odd to take a scientific approach to looking at selfies, but it's worth considering what is happening and what's going on when somebody actually stops and takes a selfie. Because there are key ingredients in every single selfie. If I was to ask any one of you in the room right now to take a selfie for me, very few of you would go and stand against a wall or a blank wall. You'd try and find something behind you, something interesting to show where you are. And the backdrop in a selfie is just as important as that image of yourself, because what you're telling your friends and family is, look where I am right now. And the subtext of that is, look where I am and look where you're not. You're probably sitting in your cubicle or at your desk in your home, kind of hating me, but in a good way. It's the old wish you were here we wrote on postcards, writ large and writ constantly in a social media environment. You also see less selfies that are just a single self. It's also about who else is in that picture with you, the two-headed selfie or the group selfie. It's about showing who you're traveling with. So it's look where I am and look who I'm with. Look where we are. It might be your spouse, your partner, your family, your children, or even more a local person or someone that you're meeting and becomes part of the experience. And then, if you really want peak selfie, if you really want those likes on those selfies, showing yourself actually in the moment having an experience. Not just look where I am and look who I'm with, but look what I'm doing right now. This is a selfie that's going to get a great reaction from those friends and family. And there, in that single piece of content, we see the three key ingredients of destination marketing. A destination, the demographics that visit it, and the experiences that they have. All of that being communicated constantly and directly from visitors to the country to an audience who are connected to them and trust them as well, because they're not selling them that experience, they're just sharing that experience. And this is the paradigm shift for the travel industry and for governments alike. That people trust and rely on user-generated content produced by their friends and family who aren't selling to them, but are simply sharing and valuing that experience from direct content and reviews after that experience. And that really is a shift, that we used to pay marketing companies to come and take incredible photos of our destination, our hotels, all of our experiences, and then publish them in paid channels to audiences to try and sell it. We now have people that pay us to come to us as customers and take the best possible incredible photos of our hotels, our properties, and every element of our experience, especially the food. We've all seen those food photos, one of the most popular things posted in social media. People want to show that culinary experience. But if one thing defines trends in user-generated content to me, that I see again and again, is that I've seen thousands of these food photos on Instagram. I'm sure you all have. Beautiful plates of food, cups of coffee, that dining experience. But you know what I've never, ever seen posted on Instagram, ever? Is a photo of a buffet table. We never see people lined up at the buffet getting those pictures of that. And why? Because this is my experience, my own unique experience that I had that I want to share with people. This is everybody's. I'm part of the crowd. I'm part of the flock. Individual experience is key to this. It's driving independent travel, and it's driving the sharing of content as well, showing your own individual experience. So the challenge for destinations, for governments, for people trying to sell their destinations is how do they leverage this? And that means aggregation of this content into a single destination platform and use of user-generated content as part of their marketing approach. And we have several innovative destinations here in the room with us today, some of which I've worked with. Our minister from Jordan, who's just spoken about some of the things that they're doing. Also like to recognize Kenya Tourist Board, who are here with us today, the CEO, Betty Radia, who's here with us as well. Great examples of destinations using technology in really interesting and innovative ways, particularly when it comes to the user-generated space. Kenya's just wrapping up a campaign that's been the first in the world, which is using Instagram stories in a millennial targeted campaign in which people could see actual travelers traveling in Kenya via Instagram stories and vote. They could be shown two possible experiences, choose the one they prefer, and those people would then have that experience and share it. People could then create their own itineraries, not just for the traveler, but for themselves, and book those, but then also, as this girl did, win that trip to Kenya as well. And that drove phenomenal click-through for the millennial audience. In Jordan, technology is being used to interact directly with tourists, in this case a new chatbot called Localike that's soon to be launched, that connects travelers with local people and local experiences and lets them chat with them about what they can do in the country as they have those experiences, and also to be able to track what they do. Jordan offers the Jordan Pass. Single pass can be bought online that combines your visa with key entry tickets into destinations. Fantastic tool to make travel easy for travelers, but also to provide data back to the destination so that we know where people are visiting, where they're spending, how long they're spending in each place, to actually track that data footprint through that direct user behavior. And also to find experiences that work for them. Jordan's recently launched the Meaningful Travel Map of Jordan, so actual experiences that have meaning at a personal level for travelers, and to be able to share those and also find those meaningful experiences other travelers had through a single map that they can find online. So destinations are starting to embrace this fact, see how important embracing user-generated content is, making it a key part of their destination mix and a key part of their research and data approach. So I'm going to hand over now to Charlie and Adam to actually take us through the report that was built, using a lot of these sorts of case studies from destinations, but showing some of the trends and the way this is headed and what some of the key ingredients are to the effective use of UGC in travel. So I'll hand over to Charlie now to take over and take us through the report.
Thanks, David. So, hi, my name's Charlie. I run the Strategic Insights team at TripAdvisor. And what we look at is the massive amount of data that TripAdvisor has on the traveler. We have over 350 million reviews that have been generated about restaurants, attractions, and hotels around the world. We have an average of 400 million people on TripAdvisor worldwide looking at our data every day. And the theme of what I want to talk about today is potential. So we all know that the mission of the World Bank really is to unlock potential. What you all do every day is to try to help developing markets find their potential and grow in some way. TripAdvisor, in a much more personal way, is about the potential of travel. So you as a traveler, if you know where you want to go and you want to go sit by the pool at the same great place you did last year, you don't need TripAdvisor. You go on TripAdvisor to try and find something unique, something different, something that you experienced that you never did before. And so with that potential on both sides, we've been thinking for some time that there was maybe a potential of us working together. How could all of this rich data and knowledge about travel be put together in some way that can help the World Bank in your own mission statement? So my team and Sally Davies' team here was fortunate enough to work with the World Bank over the last year to put together a pretty great report with a number of case studies about user-generated content, of which TripAdvisor is only a sample, and all the ways that this user-generated content can help us further each other's mission. So highly recommend you get the report. Check it out if you haven't already. There's some really interesting statements in there about Puerto Rico, about Jordan, about a number of other things. But the core of what we're trying to begin here is a conversation between our two companies and the world of travel in general about what we can do together to help advance it. Everybody is traveling these days. Everybody is interested in going new places they've never been before. And right now, 50% of people are comfortable researching, booking, and planning their trip just on a mobile device alone. And we would love to be the only source of knowledge for travel, but there's dozens and dozens of platforms out there that we're a part of. And UGC, as we've defined it, is not just reviews on TripAdvisor. It's photos, it's social posts, it's videos, it's Twitter. It's our forums where people are asking questions and getting great answers. All of that content can help make us smarter and do a lot of things for us. The biggest one, we want to drive revenues. We want to drive money in these new markets to these new businesses. We want to make markets more accessible. We want to have businesses able to leverage that content and do something with it. The number of benefits that come out of being able to analyze and study this content is pretty amazing. There we go. So definitely pick up the report if you haven't seen it already. Like I said, there's some really great cases in there. And I'm going to just go walk you through now 2 specific cases that will hopefully illustrate some of the potential of what we're seeing that we can potentially do with the World Bank. So Adam and I have been working together for about 4 years now, trying to understand if we can quantify the economy of the tourism market globally, how much it's growing, how much different content influences that growth, and what are the real benefits that come out of it. And the way that we see it is that platforms like TripAdvisor and this other content have 2 effects. One is on the consumer side, in that they truly embolden travel decisions, right? 15 years ago, if I wanted to buy a trip with my girlfriend, I would buy a trip to some place that I know is safe, somewhere in the Caribbean, to a nice place that a lot of friends have gone to. But now with platforms like TripAdvisor, people can go to a tiny hotel in Cambodia, have a great tour of Angkor Wat, and know that everything is going to be safe and terrific because they're seeing thousands of reviews on different review platforms. So people are finding more destinations, they're going on more trips, and in particular, the trips that people are taking are actually longer. They realize through all the content they see online, I can't go there for a weekend and see everything there is to see. I have to stay 4 days, 5 days, 7 days. And they have better experiences overall. They're not just saving money because they're able to compare places with different prices, but they're actually able to find which tours and attractions have the best reviews, which restaurants are the best. So they're not only doing more travel, they're getting a better time out of it. Well, as on the industry side, the industry is able to get more exposure, show off more options, increase their pricing power, and by leveraging TripAdvisor and these other sites, they get direct feedback they can use to make their product offering better. So this is a little bit of a self-serving slide, but with all the reviews and other user-generated content out there, we can measure the travel activities going into destinations. We can make some assumptions around what that travel's worth, and we can actually see growth in economic activity. which I think is a KPI that we're all interested in for the work we're doing together. So 2 quick case studies on what we can do here. One is destination development. How do we measure the development of a destination in any market, whether it's a country, a city, or even a property? So let's take Indonesia, for example. We've been working with Indonesia for quite some time. We can go into our data and we can see that every month that goes by, there's more and more people across the world looking at Indonesia as a destination. Now it's on average more than 10 million sessions on TripAdvisor of people looking at Indonesia content, and it continues to grow. What's driving that activity of people looking at Indonesia as content? It's the fact that Indonesians are listing their businesses and services online, showing off what they have for people to go engage with. So you can see this is the total number of hotels, attractions, and restaurants listed on TripAdvisor back since 2006. The data point there on the far right, it's hard to read, but that's August 2018. And one of the interesting things is this cumulative, but if you look at the total number being added per month, it starts off relatively small. 2012, you could see there was a big spike in monthly hotels added, which was due to a PR marketing effort we did at the time to try to get more hotels listed. And after there was that spike in the Indonesian economy of getting more hotels on a TripAdvisor, that knowledge was shared across the market, and you immediately start seeing more restaurants added on. And you can see that following the restaurants, more attractions started to be added. Now, I would have thought that slowdown would have already started to take place because, hey, all the attractions and restaurants and hotels must be listed already at TripAdvisor. But it hasn't slowed down. Part of that is probably because most of them are on there, but there's new ones being added all the time. There are new attractions being created. Hotels are being purchased by new owners, and that's changing. Now that you have attractions, tours, hotels, restaurants, all these things listed, people are now going there, experiencing these things, and posting their reviews on TripAdvisor, and we're seeing constant review growth. So you can see the number of new reviews coming in each month just continues to grow. Not only are the reviews growing, but the industry is using those reviews to make changes to the products that they're offering to make better stays. So you can see prior to 2013, there was a little bit of chaos in the average review score for accommodations, for restaurants, for attractions. But as of 2015, it's been only a steady improvement. And if I go back to this last slide real quick, you can see that there was a spike there in restaurants being added that would probably caused this drop in review score. Restaurants that had never been on TripAdvisor are now on there, and they're not that great yet. But they start getting reviews and start getting feedback, and they have the means now to understand what they need to improve, and these scores are just continuing to go up. One of the questions we get a lot is about over-tourism. Everybody who goes in Indonesia is going to Bali. Well, Indonesia doesn't want everybody to go to just Bali. They want them to see other destinations. What we can see here is that as of 2012, 63% of reviews on TripAdvisor were going to Bali. In 2018, it's just over 50%. Not only that, but the non-Bali hotels are getting more and better reviews, and which are in turn getting more people to go to other destinations that aren't Bali. So going back to this chart, we think there's a lot of effects that we can measure. In particular, the easiest one for us to measure early and quite frequently in real time is, are people taking more trips? Are they taking longer stays? And are they getting better value for their money? So what we see is that it's a virtuous cycle of travel development and economic growth. The first thing that has to happen for any destination is it's safe. And are there things for me to do? Can I go there and stay there at all? The second thing that has to happen is that the destination, the businesses have to be visible. It doesn't matter if there's a bunch of great hotels that people can't see them on TripAdvisor and other platforms. So we say these are businesses listed. Other platforms might just have them show up in different ways. After a business is listed online, is the owner of that business claiming the business on TripAdvisor or other platforms and engaging in dialogue with the customers? People are writing reviews. Are they writing back? Are they making their voices heard? All of that communication then drives traveler intent. They can see these places now on TripAdvisor. They can see they're trustworthy and have the reviews. People are now interested. And then those are resulting in people actually booking and traveling to these destinations and spending the money in the destinations. And the more things that there are to do there, the more they're going to spend on it. And then hopefully once they go and they engage in all these things and they enjoy it, they're posting photos online, they're writing reviews on TripAdvisor, and then all of this goes back to the start to promote even more economic growth. I hope that makes sense. So the last one I'll leave you with, if we're looking at the user-generated content, what TripAdvisor has access to help destinations, markets, businesses understand where they are in this circle, and then what we can do together to address it, that's more of a long-term project. In short term, our data tends to be actually very reflective of immediate crises that happen and changes that we can potentially do there. So we all know that there are terror attacks that have been happening across the world. There have been natural disasters that have been hugely impactful. And the question is, how much do those affect travel, really? And what we find is that, surprisingly, well over 70% say terrorism could affect my choice of destination. And 68% say that they are concerned about political issues. Now, looking at it by age, the political issues aren't as important for younger travelers, like mostly older travelers, but everybody still is a little bit concerned about terrorism, right? So in a destination that has to deal with terrorism, how much does this actually affect travel? And we can see that if you look at it by country, there's actually most countries in the world still care about these things, or say they do anyway. So let's take, for example, Barcelona. We know that last year, Barcelona was affected by an ISIS terrorist attack. So we were able to take daily data leading up to that attack and since then and see the impact it had on the market, both in people using TripAdvisor to view Barcelona and also clicking to book a hotel or other property in the city. For only the Spanish people, we don't see that much of an impact. So this is our daily trend of views of Barcelona for people in Spain, Spanish IPs. You can see a little bit of a drop-off right after the attack, but it's hard to really be sure how much of that is due to the attack and how much is seasonality. For our click-to-book traffic, again, there's a bit of a drop there, but it's really hard to quantify exactly how dramatic it is. How about for users located outside of Spain, and the rest of Europe, in the Americas, and so on? So attack right there. In terms of views after the attack, there's not much of a drop. And you might want to ask me, what is that big spike in views of Barcelona before the attack? I have no idea. I need to go figure that out. We think it's the Italians. But for clicks to book, it's highly dramatic. Now, we know for every one of those clicks to go book something, the proportion of those clicks that turn into an actual booking that travels to Barcelona, and you can see that it dropped off to well under 50% of what it was after the attack. Now, Christmas tends to be a slow period for Barcelona anyway, so we think that there is some seasonality in the second half of that drop, but that first half of the drop is almost the full impact of the attack. But you can see that as of January 1st, it's right back to where it was before. How about Puerto Rico? So Hurricane Maria hit September 16th through October 2nd in 2017. This is Puerto Rican traffic of people using TripAdvisor to view other Puerto Rican destinations. And it wasn't all that high to start with. If you live in Puerto Rico, you don't really need to book a hotel in Puerto Rico that much. But you can see it definitely had a pretty significant impact. However, it has slowly, organically been climbing back to where it is before and is pretty decent. If we look at non-Puerto Rico traffic looking, the fall off is visible, but it's not enormous. This is just viewing, and we believe that this is because there's a lot of people still on TripAdvisor viewing Puerto Rico out of curiosity, but not necessarily booking. However, the effect that it had on their click-to-book traffic is immense. And not only is it immense, but look at how it's come back. It's still under 40% of what it was before, and it seems to have been flat there. Now, Adam will talk a little bit about why this might be. He is seeing some seasonal signs of recovery. We think this is partly due to the infrastructure still not being ready for the full travel they had before, and partly due to the hotels that are back up and running being at unusually high levels of occupancy, so they can't click to book it on TripAdvisor. Right? So the final thing that we can do with this data, and Adam's going to talk more about this, and he's been a huge help, is that we know for every one of the bookings that comes from people off of TripAdvisor, how many travelers they have, how many nights they're staying in market, how many total traveler nights these make up. And if we are able to marry this to Adam's data, which is the average traveler spend on shopping, retail, hotels, and attractions per night, we can estimate the total economic impact per day of, for example, Puerto Rico not being back to the norm of where it was before. Now, what we do with that data is still TBD, but it lets at least surface it so that we're sharing it, we're working with it, and we're making decisions off it. So the conclusions coming out of this, the data is available now for all destinations worldwide. Let's figure out how to use it. Destinations in popular markets are highly resilient and bounce back, but we believe destinations in small, underdeveloped markets are going to find it a lot harder when hit with an attack. Nationalities do differ in terms of how much they're affected by terror-political differences, which is important given the type of visitor that comes to your destination. And of course, natural disasters are usually going to be a much bigger impact than anything else. So to close, we think there's an opportunity for a strong, objective, third-party, single source of knowledge that we can all tap into, and then we just go from there to figure out how to make the best decisions possible. Okay? Thank you.
Well, good morning. It's great to be with you. Over the last 4 years or so, TripAdvisor has allowed us to analyze millions and millions of records of their data. And the goal of this exercise has been to try to understand to what extent user-generated content is influencing travel around the world. Is it simply facilitating it? Is it actually acting as a catalyst for travel? What is this interaction? So I'm going to share with you some of the highlights of that. But let's start with a simple starting premise, right? And that is at a global level, when we look at global travel, it is growing faster than the world economy. If you look at our forecast over the next 10 years for the world, you can see about a 2% premium every year, compound annual average growth rate, between how much people are traveling internationally and the rate of real GDP growth, right? So that's a significant premium if people are traveling at a faster rate of growth than the rest of the economy. And you see that region by region by region. Now you may say, Adam, your firm is a very bold forecaster. On what basis would you say such a thing? Well, it's not that bold at all. In fact, it's always been this way, which is why we have the audacity to say that it will be this way in the future. If you look at global arrivals around the world and compare that to GDP, only in recession years have we seen arrivals not grow at a rate faster than the world economy. So it is not a stretch to say that that will indeed be the case as we look forward to the next decade. So understanding that takes us to why. Why is this the case that travel will be growing faster than the economy? Well, as we've looked at this, and we did this research with the International Air Transport Association a number of years ago, we tried to come up with what is driving travel growth. And certainly some of it is income. That is just the economy is growing, right? And so that's part of what is driving growth around the world. Population is also growing, so there's more income, and then there are more people with that income. That's also driving growth. Trade is driving growth. The more that economies interact with one another, the more not only incomes rise, but travel is required to facilitate that trade. But then we have this category of price and liberalization. And to be perfectly honest, there's a fair amount we don't know about that. We know that in one sense, prices on an inflation-adjusted basis have been coming down for air travel, but other things have been rising. And so there's this category of unknown that is driving travel to grow at a faster rate than the rest of the economy. And indeed, that is around the world and to different proportions. Now, let me go one level down, and we're going to try to get to an answer here to this question of why. When we look at data for Europe, and every one of these dots is a country, we see that those countries who are more engaged with online content have actually grown faster than those that are less engaged with online content. And this is just looking at countries across Europe. So there is a positive relationship. The more engaged with online content a destination is, the faster it tends to grow in terms of international travel. So we're getting somewhere with this. Now, let's look at the user-generated content portion of this. TripAdvisor, in 2007, in some way touched 7% of global travel spending. That is trips where in some way TripAdvisor was referenced to look at content or to perhaps even click to book, 7%. Fast forward about a decade later, 2017, 10.3% of all travel around the world spending was in some way influenced by TripAdvisor. All right? So that is certainly part of the picture, because one of the ways that destinations and businesses in the travel industry are engaging with the visitor, with the traveler, is through user-generated content. And that increase is really striking when you look at it region by region around the world. You see a nearly doubling of TripAdvisor influence on trips to the Middle East over this roughly 10-year period. Significant increases in Europe, the Caribbean, the Americas, and Africa as well. So this is a global phenomenon where user-generated content is becoming more and more referenced as part of the trip planning process, getting us to now over 10% of global travel spending. This doesn't answer the question, though, or the question of why. It answers the question of correlation, if you will. Okay, both of these things are happening. It doesn't answer the question of causation. Is user-generated content actually driving incremental travel that wouldn't have otherwise occurred? All right. At a world level, when we analyze what is driven over this 2010-2017 period, global travel spending growth, well, average growth in the world has been 6% a year on travel spending. The organic components, that is demographics and economics, well, that's driven about 6%. And you say, okay, that's it. Well, actually, if you look at prices, when you start to look at exchange rates and prices around the world, that's actually pulled back on growth by about 1%. And so other factors represent 1% that has offset that exchange rate effect. So that may be a little bit obscure, but let me look at it for Thailand, just as an example, because it's somewhat more dramatic than at a global level. You can see how a particular destination can benefit from these other factors. The organic component drove about 10% of spending growth per year over this period of time. Exchange rates had almost no effect over this period of time relative to the source markets where travelers come from in Thailand. But these other factors basket, 6% lift that is not attributable to economic factors, getting us to an annual average growth of 16% a year. Right? So what's going on here? Here's one of the things that's going on. Reviews, as Charlie mentioned, are increasing dramatically. One of the things that we found when we analyzed the TripAdvisor data is that a destination, as more and more reviews come online, its industry tends to grow. Now, if you look at the slope of this, what you may notice is that, well, as you get more and more reviews, the benefit does start to taper off. The benefit, I think we could all say from personal experience, of 5,000 reviews is not significantly better than 1,000 reviews for a particular property. Right? And indeed, we see that in real time. As we've analyzed the data and we've looked for causation and modeled this out, this is what we've found. In 2017 alone, nearly a full percent of the increase in global travel was actually generated by user-generated content, particularly from TripAdvisor. Now, what's interesting is that it's particularly pronounced for international travel, that is for inbound travel, just focusing on the left-hand side there. And that, what the data showed, was intuitively real to us as well, right? When we're traveling international, it's where we're going to need more guidance. We're going to need more input. It's less familiar. And so it was not a surprising finding to us to see that you see that lift, both in terms of influence, that is, people are accessing TripAdvisor, and then that little bit extra, that there's additional travel demand that's generated because of that content. How is that happening? Well, as I mentioned, about 1% of it is due to new trips that are taking place. But a greater benefit is being realized in terms of the number of nights spent in the destination and in terms of spending. What we found is that people who are heavily engaged with user-generated content are staying longer and they're spending more. In addition, to some extent, taking trips they would not have otherwise taken because they are emboldened by the content itself and the guidance that it provides. On a domestic level, it's not as significant an impact as a share of domestic travel, yet still significant indeed when you think about the size of domestic travel around the world. Now, Charlie mentioned some of these categories. I'm going to actually put numbers on this. When you model all this out, we're looking at last year $80 billion in travel spending that took place because of user-generated content. Right? And the way that that adds up is first that there is a bit of new travel, new trips to new destinations. That gets you about $40 billion alone globally. But over and above that, the trusted reviews and the scores, particularly certainly higher scores, encourage these longer stays in new destinations, in new properties, adding more to the spending pot. Actually, roughly $100 billion more just because of new destinations, longer length of stay, and therefore greater spending. Interestingly, there's a bit of a drag. What we found is that those travelers who are heavily engaged with user-generated content are saving money. So while they're going on new trips and they're staying longer, they're also finding bargains. And in doing so, on a per-day basis, are spending a bit less. And so once you net that out, you get to this total impact, that is the extent to which user-generated content is a catalyst for new travel spending of $80 billion last year. All right. How does this play out in times of crisis? And I think this is where we see some of the most exciting potential for this sort of information because who among us doesn't have our hearts go out to destinations who find themselves in crisis, and especially those of us in the travel industry? How can we use this information to their benefit, to the benefits of those businesses, those households, and communities? Well, let's take a look at some of the data. Here's Indonesia. All right, Charlie mentioned this, so I thought I'd throw this up as well. Looking at seasonally adjusted data. So we've done a little bit of work to make sure that it's clear what's actually happening, not seasonal patterns across a year. One of the things we noticed in 2018 is that both TripAdvisor sessions and clicks were both rising quickly in 2018. Now, if you are familiar with tourism data, you know that it's not always that timely. And so as of last week, this is the chart I drew, and this is actual monthly arrivals to Indonesia. But I already had the TripAdvisor data. Actually, I'd had the TripAdvisor data for a month, but didn't get a chance to look at it. And it was showing things were great. I was like, I'll bet you, I hope, that arrivals in 2018, when they come out, show that TripAdvisor was a leading indicator of how travel was going to perform. Yesterday, I actually got 2018 data for Indonesia. And sure enough, it followed the activity. And so what we see is, as a market leader, TripAdvisor data is able to give us a bit of a leading indicator on where things are going. So that's Indonesia. And Indonesia certainly benefits significantly from user-generated content. Following these same categories of trips, nights, and spending, there's a lift of about 1.1% last year as a result of user-generated content because travelers are able to access these reviews, be emboldened to travel, to stay longer, and to spend more, and a lift in spending of 1.7% last year. We broke it out even further across these same categories, but also looked at what's the benefit of service improvement, right? And that gets us, once we factor that in on the plus side, we take out the costs of the savings in terms of lower spending per day. We get into a benefit to Indonesia last year of $568 million in traveler spending because of the role of user-generated content in eliminating friction and creating better information. Now, Philippines. Now, Philippines is also an interesting case study, particularly when we think about crisis. Now you see page views in 2018 begin to fall significantly, and arrivals begin to fall as well. Now we know that there's been political tensions in in Philippines, and that's been some of the story over recent years. But who knows what happened in the spring of 2018 in the Philippines? Boracay was closed down, right? So the most iconic, perhaps, destination in the Philippines, very publicly, right, closed down because of environmental concerns, right? So what did that do? Well, it immediately lowered interest in TripAdvisor, and we already see it beginning to show itself in terms of actual travel demand. And so it gives us the conclusion that we can continue to track where things are headed in much better time, even as a leading indicator, by looking at user-generated content engagement while we wait for actual travel patterns. For those of you that love scatter diagrams, and I know that you're out there, this is for you. This is just showing that these two things move together remarkably well. Economists just get super happy with an R-squared over 0.9, and here we are, right? When we look at TripAdvisor sessions and international arrivals on a monthly basis, every dot is a month. I mean, these things are locked tight. And so therefore, we can conclude that it's a great indicator of where things are going. When we look at crises around the world, this is work that we did for the World Travel and Tourism Council a couple of years ago, and we looked at crises around the world. And on the left side, you see this is the number of months it took for that destination from the point of the crisis to the point where it actually fully recovers to its pre-crisis level, how many months it took. You can see it's a wide range, right? From a couple of months up to a few years. And then on the bottom axis is the impact depth. That is, what is the percentage loss in arrivals at the trough? And the same thing. You see anywhere from almost no impact to a 15% loss on an annual basis. And so what does this tell us? It just tells us that it's really difficult to get to a conclusion at the beginning of a crisis on how it's going to play out. You know, when we average these across different types of crises in terms of how long is this going to last until a destination comes back, I mean, the ranges are really wide. I mean, they're the tightest if it's disease-related, but certainly environmental disaster, if infrastructure and product is affected, you can see that you're looking at potentially significant or in some cases not so significant length of time until things are back online fully. So I'm bringing this kind of toward a close here, but let's look at Puerto Rico, a very current and close to home case. As Charlie showed, substantial declines in TripAdvisor activity in terms of sessions and clicks. But when I seasonally adjust the data, I begin to see glimmers of hope, and that the TripAdvisor data is starting to trend upward. That is, it's not as bad as it was earlier in the year, or certainly last year. And the arrivals data is starting to come off the floor as well. And so this is critically important if you're in the Puerto Rico tourism industry. Right, as we're working right now with Discover Puerto Rico, they need to know this. Right? They need to know it for a number of reasons. All right? Because in crises, one of the most important tools at a destination's disposal is information. Right? Misinformation, misconceptions are the enemies of recovery. And by informing both consumers and informing the industry who's making real business decisions, we can help destinations move through crises more quickly. What sort of decisions is the industry making? Right? They're making air service decisions. If you're an airline, do we bring that route back online? Hotel rates, right? At what point do I begin to try to raise rates? Marketing decisions. If you're a destination marketing organization, do I just pull out and not throw good money after bad? Or is interest starting to present itself and I want to begin to market? These are real decisions in the midst of a crisis that a destination and businesses need to make. Alongside that, online travel activity, of course, is nearly real time. And it's a leading indicator of where things are headed because it's search for potential trips. So where does this lead us? I think this is the last slide I have for you. Two, I think, potential ways to use this information to serve destinations in crisis. One is simply a dashboard of high-frequency data. So some of the data, what if we had a way that this could be viewed with the near real-time data alongside actual travel data, whether it's flight data and visits data, hotel data. And all this data is available in different forms, if it could be consolidated and processed and presented in a way that was informative. And indeed, if that were in place in times of crisis, and I've seen destinations, crisis hits, and they scramble to put this together in real time. But if there was actually a programmatic way to do this, it would indeed efficiently inform these decisions about capacity, about pricing, about marketing strategies. The second potential benefit is a bit of a longer-term view, which is to create a method of looking at destination health, an index, if you will, that tracked some of these same indicators, but in a way to look at kind of fundamental positioning across different destinations, to look at the strength of that destination and how it is evolving on the basis of things like user-generated content, actual travel demands, and economic drivers to these things. And you can see some of the potential indicators that would comprise this index. But the benefit of it would be that it would enable then investors and planners to benchmark different destinations or a particular destination over time across common criteria and to assess changes in market position and therefore make better decisions over the long term as well. So with that, thank you very much for having us. Really a pleasure.
Thank you, Damien, Adam, and Charlie. I was told earlier this morning, you are moderating the nerd panel, right? And yes, now I see that, but in a very good way. In a very good way. Who knew that my behavior gallivanting across the planet as I travel, as I eat, as I take a selfie, as I walk around, and as I book trips, really can be aggregated and tell us so much information in real time. So thank you for sharing that. I will never take another selfie without thinking it twice. But all right, I want to make sure that we capitalize on clearly the brain trust that we have of talent and expertise on the stage right now. And I'd like to begin with John, because he's been awfully quiet, but I know for a fact that we can all benefit from what he has to say. So John, I know that you in your role at the World Bank Group are working, among other things, on leveraging TripAdvisor's data to improve destination management and marketing, especially for developing destinations. We just heard about Indonesia from Charlie and Adam. Can you flesh that out more for us or share another example? What is that like?
Sure, well, thank you. This has been a kind of bit of an eye-opener to me, actually, all of a sudden. I mean, I thought I knew quite a bit about what these guys kind of had to offer the bank in terms of information, but to be frank, I'm pretty impressed, and we obviously have a much longer conversation to go on with, so this morning's signing is great news for me that we can, put some structure around digging deeper into the material. Both the presenters here today mentioned Indonesia, and we've been working directly with Indonesia ourselves and with my colleagues here. For many years, when the bank looks at destinations to see how we can help, we're using all sorts of kind of scanning tools to see, well, what's really going on in that destination. You look at the statistics, you look at all the data that's available to you. And over recent years, let's say the last decade or so, the TripAdvisor type review information, and it's not just from TripAdvisor, but there are several other sites that produce this review type material, has become part of the kind of portfolio of the kind of material that we would look at. I'd have to say it's been somewhat kind of anecdotal because we kind of also know the limitations of that. We were looking recently, somebody mentioned the Philippines, at 2 or 3 new destinations there. We studied what the TripAdvisor, without talking to our colleagues here, just like any other researcher, study the TripAdvisor reviews and see, oh my gosh, the Japanese don't seem to like the restaurants in Boracay, or they love the beaches, the Koreans love the beaches in one part of the Philippines but not in another. Why would that be? Let's sort of look a bit more detailed into that. We turn to Indonesia. The Indonesians, as you know, have been developing their tourism industry. They're on a rapid growth path. They want to double the number of visitors there, foreign visitors that is, putting aside the 250 million annual domestic trips, which is a serious contributor to tourism as well, and generate a lot of the reviews that we can rely on. So Indonesia wants to have a rapid growth in its tourism industry. They come to the World Bank. Why would they do that? I mean, Indonesia has, arguably the most successful island resort in the world in Bali. Last year 1.2 million extra visitors went to Indonesia. 970,000 of them went to Bali. They know what's going on. They'd quadrupled their expenditure on marketing in that country a year or two ago. They won the gold medal of openness by adding 169 countries in one day to the people who could arrive in that country without a visa. So it's not like, they don't know what the levers are and what some of the tools are. But they do know that there was some problem. How is it that a country like Indonesia can have such a successful destination and only have one of them in a country of 250 million people? So what they want to do is diversify their tourism impact across the country. They want to get a lot more destinations going. They have 100 in mind, and the first 10 of these, what they call the 10 new Balis, is why they came to the bank to try and get some advice on how to do that. Now, there are a whole series of reasons that we're working with them on a number of different fronts. But when they look into detail as to why they only have one Bali and not 10, there were a series of diagnostics that were done, and one of them was kind of infrastructure, connectivity and all the usual stuff. But another one was quality. They realised that the market was telling them that a lot of what's being offered, particularly at the SME end, where most of the money, of course, is transacted, wasn't so great. And so when we looked at this and as a bank tried to respond to say, well, how can we help them with that? Our question was, well, how do we actually measure what the quality is? And so we turned to our colleagues here at TripAdvisor and started to dig into this data and spent the last couple of years really looking at three things. How do we use this data to actually measure the quality of these properties? Because whilst they won't tell us who they are, our colleagues here do know who they are, and they know exactly what the quality indicators are for every enterprise that's listed there. Secondly, they know what the quality deficiency is, because the ratings can tell you all of that. So we can corral those areas of weakness into groups, and then the bank can then design interventions that address those weaknesses. And then finally, we can then use the data to see whether there's been any improvement, because we now have such a large amount of data in each of the destinations that this has become reliable, sufficiently robust for us to rely on. So who's really benefiting from this? Obviously there are two critical people that benefit from this. The first is our client. At the end of the day, the World Bank is here to help people on the ground. Those enterprises generate more revenue so that they can address these questions that the bank is concerned about, alleviating poverty and building shared prosperity. That's why we're here. That's why we're interested in this data. And so we need to be fairly confident that that data is going to help us actually do that. So the countries themselves are the first people benefiting. But the second people benefiting, to be frank, is the bank. The bank doesn't throw money around lightly, as many of you know. And to convince our board to spend $300 million assisting the Indonesians, in a $4 billion program, we need to make sure we have extremely robust measures of success. And so for me to put my name on the line when those documents go forward, to say that I can actually rely on this data to measure this improvement in quality, that could be a career-limiting decision if it's, if we really can't rely on it. So that's not to say, by the way, that we're totally beholden to people like TripAdvisor. There are several other sources that we triangulate to measure these things, but it does give you an example of the millions of data points that can be used, not just to identify weaknesses, but then to actually measure improvement. And of course, this is good news for us. We've got independent, robust indicators that we need to satisfy.
Thanks, John, for sharing how that public-private partnership works. Damien, you've been quoted as saying, digital is not the future, it is now. And if you are not prioritizing digital, then you are in the past. Unquote. I don't think anyone would argue with that in this room, or anywhere really, at this point. But how should a destination specifically use user-gen content as part of an overall strategy? Where does one even start? And can you give us one or two specific examples?
Yeah, it's about flexibility and planning, and I think I probably said that because you still do hear some DMOs, tourist boards, talking about digital as a future project where they want to invest in the future, and it's where we're headed. But it's about them grasping that it is the here and now. And I think one of the real challenges, particularly in government, is always the loss of control. We're talking about an environment that is effectively not just user-generated, but controlled and user managed. The information flow to a great extent is being controlled by those visitors, and that's anathema to a lot of government. It's something that they feel they can't manage. So they need to take an approach and build in resources to be able to measure that more effectively and to aggregate it and monitor it. Also, how do you get all of this UGC into one place to use it as a marketing resource? So it's about using software and systems that can enable us, because you can. This is why hashtags have become so prevalent, to be able to draw content into one place, filter that within the messaging of the destination, and then turn that into marketing material, purpose and repurpose it. So there is an element of control that's there. So it's finding that balance between the two that is critical, but also really appreciating the voice of the traveller as this is put, and how important that is. Particularly when it comes to independent travel, when it comes to adventure travel as well. People want to hear from those other travellers, and they trust it. And for somebody who works in a tourist board, they're generally desk-bound. They're not out there experiencing the destination. So it's value for them in terms of richness of information as well. You look at a project like the Jordan Trail that was mentioned today. One of the easiest resources we can get to share with potential hikers of what that trail is like is content posted by hikers. And by using hashtags, by using geofencing and geolocation around the actual trail, we can draw in every piece of social media content that hikers are posting on a daily basis. It gives us the raw experience of what that hiking is like, but also gives us information about what the conditions are like out there. So it's a win-win for everybody when you bring that together. And it's also great for creating what we call content communities as well. That may be regional, it might be thematic around a particular activity, scuba diving, fishing, paragliding, but also a particular region of a country as well. By looking at how they manage their UGC and aggregating it regionally, you can almost create sub-brands within a destination strategy that are drawn around the content that's communitized around that particular region or around that particular type of product. And then use the broader destination platform as a hub to bring all of that together and make it part of the marketing mix. And it just greatly enriches the ability of a destination to carry out really effective marketing. Because, for the first time over the last couple of years, we've heard at a lot of tourism forums people starting to ask this question of, do we really need DMOs? Do we really need tourist boards anymore? When so much of the marketing onus is sitting in the hands of the tourists, what's the government's job? What's their job? And this gives them an opportunity to use the profile, the platform, and the budget they have to take that content together and purpose it and turn it into really powerful marketing material that the audience wants.
That's interesting. Giving up control, I think, is probably a pretty high barrier and tough to convince people of and DMOs of.
Yeah, it's a big challenge, but it's what people are looking for. And it's appreciating that and valuing that and finding a way to both not just manage it, but measure it as well.
It's interesting. Some of our DMO clients, some of their best ROI is actually when they've leveraged user-generated content, or they've actually done marketing on user-generated content platforms, because it gets them directly in front of the people that are already searching. And so, in a sense, they're taking control of a new way of communicating and engaging with their customer.
A common challenge we see is getting the mindset of tourist boards to change and DMOs to change. Television commercials. We still see destinations saying, what about our 60-second television commercial? Where are you going to broadcast that now? Who's watching television anymore? People are now downloading all of their content directly through Netflix or other channels. They're not even being exposed to advertising anymore as a model. So they inevitably end up putting it on YouTube. And when was the last time you went to YouTube to watch an ad? Ads are what we skip over on YouTube. The traditional television commercials become a resource that many destinations are still investing in with no place to put it. And it's far better they focus on actual raw experiences from travelers. It may not be as slick and it may not be as professionally produced, but it's far more influential and trusted than that 60-second soundbite of information is going to be.
Totally. Adam, you work with many destinations on tourism performance and economic impact reporting. Can you make some generalizations about the economic impact user-generated content can have? For example, is it a tool that you recommend for all emerging destinations? And if not, what are the factors that emerging destinations should be looking at?
Yeah. I can't think of a reason why a destination wouldn't engage with user-generated content. I mean, we're talking about, 7 in 10 trips around the world involves searching online for content of some kind, whether it's user-generated or otherwise. And as I showed, TripAdvisor alone is 10% of that. So to not engage with that, it would stretch my imagination why a destination wouldn't. The benefits, I think, are particularly important now as the industry is, more and more dealing with questions of over-tourism and how to ensure that the benefits are being dispersed to small and medium-sized enterprises as well as to different parts of destinations. And what we've found just by analyzing the data is that it's that user-generated content that is creating these connecting points to new destinations and to new businesses that help with that dispersion of demand and help to alleviate over-tourism. And then take it on the other side, if you're an emerging destination where you have a niche, but you're really struggling to get a brand and to get share of voice in the marketplace, well, user-generated content in these platforms gives that smaller emerging destination or a boutique property the ability to really compete just on the basis of quality. Right? Now it's about quality, not about size alone, and so it's the great equalizer of actual travelers being able to provide content on the quality of these destinations.
So you've talked about the great equalizer and all of that, but are there still barriers to entry? We heard in the first panel that 60% of people are not online. So there are inherent barriers to this technology, right, that we need to overcome?
Well, there are, and those barriers continue to come down. The reality is, the other thing to bear in mind is that proportion of the world population that isn't online tend to not be frequent travelers. Mm-hmm. Right? So when we think about the traveler market, they're going to be much more connected. And so the barriers are not that high when you think about it in terms of who's traveling.
For the travelers, yeah. Charlie, as a casual user I am a casual user of Instagram, Facebook, and yes, TripAdvisor, and other UGC platforms. I certainly never would have predicted that years ago there was this vast potential for the gathering of macro-level data. If I had, I probably would be a lot wealthier than I am now. So companies such as yours are sitting on reams and reams of this kind of data on travelers' planning and purchasing behaviors, product quality, and benchmarking, as you had said. So what's the greatest opportunity and challenge in leveraging this big data? You talked about some potential opportunities there, but from your perspective, what specifically can it do? What should it do? And perhaps what shouldn't it do?
Yeah. I need to be careful about this question because my CEO's in the room, so I want to make sure it fits in with his strategy. But, we have always had a business very focused on the hotels. And to some degrees as well the OTAs. We're trying to help people find and book the perfect trip, leading with the hotel stay. Where are you going to book that? And then more recently, we've been really seeing success developing restaurants and attractions and other things to add on to that. And that's the heart of what we do. So it's going to continue to be what we do. So my team has been happy to support that core part of the business by helping out our sales organization. We're within the sales organization. And giving evidence to the hotel chains, to the OTAs, to our DMO clients, that what they're spending on TripAdvisor is not only successful in generating an ROI using this data, but more and more we've been developing the tools that shows them opportunities they may not have considered. So, for example, we have a tool now for the hotel chains that we call Competitive Hotels Intelligence, which tells every hotel chain in the world who their biggest competitors are and how they stack up against them to unlock ideas and knowledge that they can potentially use to move ahead of those competitors and benchmark their success. We do a lot of testing for the advertising, but I think that for the sake of this conversation, we've been thinking for some time that there's potentially other revenue opportunities that we could get ourselves into. And the fact that we see from our annual traveler data study that 56% of all bookings made online come from people who have used TripAdvisor means that our data is pretty representative of travel. You know, if we representative of, if our users only made up 10% of all bookings, who cares? But we're more than half of all travel. Adam spoke into the size of that revenue. So is there a capacity for us to have free tools that we offer to the industry to help them grow, and potentially some money-making services that that we give out on a selective basis to help different DMOs, governments? I think there probably is. Last year, a team at McKinsey that I've been talking to reached out who was supporting the government of Abu Dhabi. The government of Abu Dhabi had hired McKinsey for 2 years to build a data stack for them that integrated all of their education data, their traffic data, their weather data, their construction data into one central database that the government could use to plan urban development in Abu Dhabi. McKinsey wanted to add our data into that, which sounded like a great idea. So we worked out a contract directly with the government of Abu Dhabi for 3 years of our data to show their development of Abu Dhabi as a tourism market, especially as it competes to Dubai. And so far, they seem pretty happy with it. So would we continue to move in that direction? I don't know why we wouldn't.
Sounds like you've got some new business models to think about, and certainly the applications of this data are so far-reaching.
Yeah.
I've got other questions, but the audience has a lot of questions as well. And so I think we should move on to that, looking at our time. All right, so I'm going to read it here, read the first one here. And please, anybody who cares to answer, please just jump right in. How can the disintermediation of the experience economy in tourism be improved by the use of new technologies and the Internet of Things? How co-creation can have a positive impact? How can co-creation have a positive impact near local communities? That's the first question. Who wants to take that on?
I think it's a lot of words. I think it's coming back to what I was talking about with regard to communities, the content communities, but also that's a challenge for destinations as well, because for those communities to play a role in that sort of supply chain back to destination marketing also means they need to be technically savvy and aware as well. A lot of the work I do in destinations is about addressing that issue as well. How do you make sure that the SMEs, the small business owners in those communities, have the resources and the skills and sometimes even the connectivity to be able to play a role in that part as well? It can be a tremendous liberator, but it can also be a challenge to address those issues as well. But ultimately, yeah, that co-creation word, it's a buzzword, but it's very true, and that's what all of this is about. That content is going to be far richer and more powerful if it's coming from those communities and the travelers that visit them. And it's really about looking almost at a supply chain from the traveler experience back through the trade and then back to the DMO or tourist board. And those are aggregation tools and intermediary tools are needed each step of the way. So it's as organic and user-generated as it may be, there's still a structure that's needed to manage that relationship.
Anyone else?
I think if you take that word disintermediation, and I take it to mean allowing travelers just to talk to each other.
Yeah.
Right? You're not in the way anymore as the industry. There's going to be pain points there. If you're an underperforming hotel in terms of quality, that's going to hurt you. But what we found is that on average for the destination, it's helpful. And so if you think about the benefits of UGC in the short run being the fact that right now I'm trying to take a trip and I want good information, and I'm going to pick the better property because it's got a better rating, better reviews. That's a short-term benefit. But over the long run, what it does is it actually improves the overall quality because it has sort of this Darwinian effect on the product. Because if you are weak, you will die, right, in this world of disintermediation. Or you will improve, which is a better outcome, I suppose.
But who decides what weak is? I mean, is there a risk of
poor
us being
service, poor
swayed?
quality,
Okay,
poor cleanliness. I mean, any of these things, right? And that's the benefit of getting this immediate feedback from the customer because you don't have to do market research. Someone's going to be writing about it, and those properties that are most engaged with that content, they're responding to it, they're reading, they're treating it as feedback, they tend to improve overall, over time for a destination, improves the quality of the experience for visitors and makes that destination grow more than it would have if you didn't have that immediate feedback mechanism.
And also, it's disintermediation of brand as well, which is of benefit to a destination. Increasing destinations are realizing that that one big idea everyone talks about, that one big brand, isn't so relevant anymore because it's about a lot of little micro experiences and conversations that happen between travelers that are creating their own little brands and their own little experiences that exist. You know, the Jordan Trail is of appeal to a hiking community that exists, and that's not part of the central destination brand, of course, overall as for the destination, but it's one that's driving a lot of real engagement for that sector. So it kind of breaks down brand as well and creates lots of multiple mini brands within a destination.
Yeah.
And I think that actually segues into this other question. What role can data have to help combat over-tourism? A couple of you have addressed it a little bit, but does anyone want to go a little bit deeper? Charlie?
I mean, we were just talking about that today back in the green room. I never thought about this before. There's a finite number of safe destinations in the world. You know, we could probably do a little work and figure out exactly what that number is, but maybe it's 1,200, maybe it's 2,000, maybe it's less. But you run out of places to go on Earth at some point. And over-tourism is simply recognizing that there's more people traveling than ever before. They're spending more. There's a higher proportion of the human race is getting on a plane and going somewhere. And over-tourism is a huge negative consequence of the fact that there's a finite number of destinations. I think the opportunity that we all have in this room is to increase the number of safe, interesting destinations that people want to go to so that the supply keeps up with the demand. I think there's a lot that can be done in places like Barcelona, which are already crowded. But if I were the Spanish government, I'd be trying to figure out how do I use UGC and people like yourselves to try to make some more places in Spain just as exciting and interesting.
Yeah, look, I think this demand-supply issue is a very important entry point for people like the bank or people who work here at the bank, because to generate that supply, we need a lot more people who are seriously capable of competing in this sector. And of course, our interest is in the developing world. You know, whenever we talk to them about tourism, it's competition. You know, how are you going to get positioned? How are you going to get to compete against the Barcelonas of this world who may have other problems? Particularly when you're talking to countries that have got no budget for this, pretty limited human resource capability to do it. This type of information, managed well, is an absolute goldmine for those people because they can target very specifically the kind of people that they need. You know, it wasn't so long ago, people like us at the bank would have to be financing, very substantial consumer research to get anywhere near a level of confidence that we could advise our client as to what their future might look like. And that type of research, as many of you know, is high cost and very high risk. If it's not targeted properly, you could be providing the wrong kind of advice. So the question, and I guess the challenge for us now, is to, here is all this material, how do we channel it to the right person, in those developing destinations in a form that they can actually make investment decisions that they can rely on going forward and become, effective competitors in this market. What we feel, I guess, is that there is an opportunity using this type of information to rapidly accelerate that process so that these countries do not get left behind and can become, effective competitors, at a much rapid rate of trajectory.
Yeah, I mean, over-tourism is probably the thing I'm talking about more than ever now. It's become such a hot topic. But technology can also play a role in measuring and mapping that as well. I mean, the fact that all of those Instagram photos, people posting content from their phones are data points. We can see where they were and at what time they did that. And you can map and heat map where the volumes of tourists are in attractions and sites. And that becomes part of a dispersal strategy, finding alternatives during those times of day, alternative places to send them, ways of getting people into sites and attractions to try and thin out that traffic. But also, it can show you yield potential as well. If you've got that many people in one place, it's how Uber deals with demand. The prices go up. You have surge pricing when they have that critical volume of mass, that perhaps this is an indicator that pricing could be a way of controlling the market as well, and you've got the demand that's present and mappable as well.
So using the data to help figure out how to disperse, how to
manage,
pivot, how to manage,
and how to price.
Prioritize.
Yeah.
Great. I think we have time for one last question. Will there be any changing roles, characteristics of local tourist boards through their own digital platforms? I think that's a question about the changing roles of DMOs, perhaps, changing types of staff. Damien, you addressed that earlier.
Yeah. I mean, the key word there is curation. Another word you hear a lot of people say that their role is changing. There's always this discussion with DMO of what does that middle M mean? Is it marketing or is it management? And that's changed a lot. And really, destination managers have become brand managers in a way. And that's the health of the brand, but also it's the character of the brand and all the components within it. And increasingly, it's about curation of content and delivery of that to audiences and creating a platform for that.
And letting go of control a little bit.
Hard as it is, yeah, peeling back those fingers.
I think what's going to happen there is that whoever can do that creation becomes the DMO. You know, whether that's the government or it's somebody else, that's what's going to happen.
Or a community.
It could be the community.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is an increasing demand by very small communities. We mentioned Indonesia. The government there wants to develop, I think, 700,000 or 800,000 homestays in the next few years. You know, these are being developed in places where there are 20 people, 50 people, maybe 100. They're rolling up to courses and training programs so that they can work out how to do this, so they can control that content and respond to the reviews that they're getting. And, you know, that's where the power is going to go. And that's the sort of transformational shift that I think we're trying to sort of touch on here today. That is something that is really quite extraordinary. And to see that happen over a short period of time is going to be something that's going to be very exciting.
I think part of their role also is to, we talk about brand, and usually people often have a negative association with brand, that it's something false. But the thing about UGC is that it's none of it's coming from us, it's coming from travelers. If you're a business and you want to get a good ranking on TripAdvisor, the way to do that is to set expectations correctly. So, you give a 5 out of 5 if you stay at a tiny little bed and breakfast in the middle of nowhere, if it is a much better bed and breakfast than you expected. Likewise, if you go to a $10,000 a night room in Dubai and it's amazing, but it's not the best hotel room you've ever had, you're probably going to leave a 3 on TripAdvisor. So I think that the local destinations equally need to make sure that whatever they're promoting, whatever they're putting online, reflects what it really is, so that when the travelers go there, they're a little bit surprised in a good way and not finding that their expectations were missed.
And attracting the right kind of
Exactly.
people. Right?
And that's the right kind of people that they need to see. Yep.
Yeah. Well, great. We have several more questions, but I don't think we'll get to it. But hopefully the panel might be willing to answer these questions offline. Well, judging from the energy in the room, the quality and quantity of the questions, and the passion of our travelers' responses, and excitement about data, there is promise in incorporating user-generated content and the data that it produces into destination management and marketing strategies. There's also some peril in that while the barriers to entry may be lower, the inherent complexity of the tools and the rapid evolution of technology may leave less resourced destinations behind. There's obviously no turning back the clock now. These technologies are here to stay. So as we move forward, we need to find ways to multiply the potential even as we mitigate the problems. And that's the task that lies for us ahead. I think we generated a lot of food for thought, and it's perfect timing because I think lunch is coming up next on the agenda. This ends our session. I would like to thank the audience for your attention and your interest and your questions, and to our panelists for being so generous with their time and expertise. Damien Cook, John Perrottet, Charlie Ballard, and Adam Sachs. Thank you.